welcome to the Inside Britball podcast. My name's Andy Taylor and I'm joined by Arran and Kiwi. I'm glad to have you back to talk about WFFL a little bit later than we planned, isn't it, guys? Because we planned to get together last week, but didn't quite come about. But we've got illnesses and injuries, but Kiwi, we're doing okay because we've all heard about the injury and obviously the one pointer injury, but hopefully you're recovering nicely from it.
Yeah, it's a little bit better in the last couple of days. I had an MRI yesterday, so I'm hoping to know by Friday how bad it is, whether it's weeks or months out. But fingers crossed for the weeks option, because I'm really looking forward to summer flag football and playing tournament football with the Huskies in the summer, because so much better than playing in the winter. So I'm hoping it's the weeks and not the months option.
Yeah. Absolutely, me too. And Arran, obviously you've been doing a lot of traveling, but also you found yourself in Huddersfield, not necessarily rainy, but certainly not comfortable, and then Coventry, where it was very, very rainy.
Yeah, so Huddersfield was actually quite nice. The weather was okay.
Glorious.
It was a bit on and off. 1 minute my coat was on, next minute it was off, but ultimately it was dry and it wasn't windy, so it was okay. And then, shadowed by the day after in Nuneaton, which was a washout at best. I think that's the best way to phrase it. It was definitely... I'm glad I wasn't in my car getting those seats wet on the way home. Let's put it that way.
Let's just say listeners learned when we had this bright idea on Sunday morning, even though I was injured and couldn't walk, that we would go and watch the games because we were really excited to see what was happening, and it wasn't that far, and we were kind of maybe lulled into a false sense of security because of the great day we'd had the day before. So, Aaron's like, well, I'll just pack you a chair and another chair and you can put your leg up and just sit on the sideline with James and watch it. Okay, cool. Got there. For the first, it was cold, but for the first, maybe most of the first game, it was okay. And then honestly, the heavens just opened and it was torrential, and I'm sat there with my leg propped up, can't move, like getting absolutely wet through it.
Gathering pools of water.
Yeah, it was in the end, I was like, I'm taking James inside, and we ended up going inside, and then in the end I was like, I'm taking James to the supermarket because it's warm and I need something hot to eat. It's
100%.
So lesson learned, check the forecast before you commit to any flag football that you're not actively participating in.
And going back to the day before on the injury and Kiwi's injury, I have to say, so I was on daddy duty, so I was watching from a distance, and we had Fiona. Hi, Fiona. I know she listens. Her and her husband Chris listen. But Fiona was running the sideline, doing an amazing job, by the way. So I was communicating with the sideline via phone, and when Vic got injured, my first instinct was to message, did we get the point? And then it was...
Obviously we did.
Yeah, and then it was, is she okay? Please tell me it's not her knee. And so... yeah, that was my commitment to the game in terms of the game that we were playing. And
HC first, husband second.
Yeah, and maybe to clarify for those that don't know, because we did have a conversation with a few people on Sunday who hadn't realised Arran is actually my husband. So, we did have some conversations. I was speaking to a guy, I can't remember his name. I don't know if you remember his name, but the coach from the Huntsmen was chatting to me, Neil, on the sideline. And he said, first time I've ever been recognised. I said, it's Kiwi from the podcast. And I was like, yeah. And he started chatting. And then he goes, the other guy said such and such. And then I was like, this is my husband, Arran. Because Arran had just walked back from the bathroom. And he was like, the other guy.
That's hilarious.
So maybe for those that don't know,
now,
we are.
Your Mr. and Mrs. Kiwi brand has been dropped like a lead balloon, hasn't it?
I know, clearly. So yeah, for those that don't know, Arran is actually my husband, which is why we travel as a group of three with our son James to football. But it was just funny that he was like, the other guy said such and such, and literally like it was planned. 10 seconds later, Arran rocks up and I was like, this is Arran, my husband. And he's like, you're the other guy. So it was a bit crazy.
100%. James Harrison, also known as Debo, to me.
That's between me and you, Andy. Yeah. Vic doesn't
Exactly.
recognise him as Debo, and she makes
Exactly.
me realise that's how I refer to him when you and I.
No, it's lovingly said as someone whose first game was the 2009 Super Bowl where James Harrison did that interception of Kurt Warner back for a touchdown. So it's only said lovingly, of course. But no, fantastic to have you both because we've got an amazing couple of days of results to talk about, where in the end, not as much chaos as I'd prayed for and hoped for, but we still had a lot of twists and turns along the way. And we'll probably talk about some surprises as well. And then at the very end, we'll have a peek towards the 22nd, which is obviously finals day up in Ravenscraig, isn't it? And we can have a look at how the playoffs will shape up. So first of all, I've got it loaded up as in chronological order for the HNC, so the Highlands and North Conference. On the Saturday, as you guys have alluded to, you travelled all the way over to Huddersfield, where the Leeds Samurai were hosting, and we had a good bunch of games, and certainly Cheshire Huskies were nearly in it. Obviously, high scoring games as far as I could tell. Where did that all come from, Kiwi? Did it all fall apart when your knee fell apart as well?
Well, yeah, the last game that I didn't play is the Leeds Samurai Cheshire Huskies. No, I can't take credit for that. That it was, but I just think it's taken all season, but we did, I guess, just had a good day on offense. Not to say it was a mistake-free day. We definitely had some chances that we didn't take, but yeah, it was nice to see those big score lines, and obviously the win over the Giants was definitely one that was a bit of a shock and massively celebrated. I think Arran, who mentioned that he wasn't directly on the sideline, heard us probably for the length of the game shouting, but definitely in the last couple of minutes. Ultimately it didn't matter and it didn't make any difference to the playoff spots. But at the time, I can tell you it felt like we'd won the league at the time. But yeah, it was good. And then
that's a big win, isn't it? Don't underplay it. That first season in the league against Sheffield Giants, who we know have got some GB players or at least ex-GB players, and to come away and beat them, albeit by a single point, a win's a win, and not one you probably chalked up if you were looking ahead at the beginning of the season, I'm sure.
No, and I think the thing is also from everybody as well as the Huskies, but the improvement in the football and the games from the first tournament and the last tournament, is huge. Especially in this division, I think Leeds had a bit of a rough day, as we've seen. You can see in the scores here. But what I will say is, and anyone who wasn't there won't know, but they were also trying out QBs the course of the day because their QB isn't going to be at finals. The QB they've had, I think their usual QB has been out for most of the season. They had someone else filling in, but that person's also not able to come to finals. So they were almost doing like QB tryouts in tournament 4, knowing that their position was relatively safe, which is why you see those scores probably, not as dominant, particularly as you might have thought, or not as close as you might have thought. So, yeah, the insider knowledge.
The Leeds Samurai kind of fit where they've kind of fit most of the year, having it kind of behind Sheffield Giants and Manchester Titans, albeit they probably will be disappointed with that, I'm sure, to not be mixing in with those two teams, and then obviously above the likes of yourselves and the Huskies and the Titans Bees, which is probably maybe meets their expectation, could probably be below their expectations as well, but Sheffield Giants will be disappointed with that day, won't they? They didn't come away unscathed because they did have the number 2 seed in sight, albeit a Titans game going the wrong way would have needed that help, but in the end we ended up with the Titans, Giants, Samurai finishing in that order, and there wasn't really much chaos in the end in that. And we'll talk about the Sunday games that were left. But Arran, the same for yourself. Was there anything that stood out to you on that day?
I think Kiwi's kind of touched upon it. I think Titans Bees look good to me. They had really good numbers and they look good. We haven't met each other yet in terms of the Huskies and the Bees. Obviously, there was Stormgate in terms of when we should have met them, which I think would have been a great leveler anyway, regardless. I think I would have gone anyway, because I think the weather would have dictated who won that game, pretty much, or who adapts to the weather quicker. So for me, that was an interesting game to see how we would get on. I think the Huskies ran out of time. We went down. I think at some point we were 20 or 9 down or something like that. Don't quote me on the numbers. However, in the second half, started pulling it back. So that was a really good game to watch because, let's be honest, they're essentially two new teams battling it out for bragging rights, essentially, over the M62 corridor, or 56 corridor, should I say. So it was a good game, but I think generally the quality of Titans Bees, and obviously, as we've said, the offense on the Huskies really stepped up. What I would say is that, equally the defense did quite well despite them scores. So I think overall the quality was really good. I think Sheffield came and did the job, being honest. I think they knew what they needed to do and just did it. They'd already done it at that point. So that's not taking away anything from the win that we got. They were genuinely a great team to play. And it was a really tight game. And you could see both sides wanted to win it. But to be fair, I mean, kudos to the Sheffield Giants. They were a great team, and even the head coach came over and said, you've really come on as a team. So the quality is definitely stepped up, as we knew it would do from a Huskies perspective. And I appreciate I'm being very Huskies biased at the minute, but I just want to, obviously highlight this particular game day because those Huskies had 4 fixtures, so hence why they're featuring a bit more on my assessment. I'm going to be honest, Manchester Titans look really, really strong. I saw them and I thought they looked crisp, clean, well-drilled team. So it'll be interesting at finals to see them there and how they get on.
Brilliant. And so that set up a situation into Sunday for the HNC where we had Black had obviously gone away with it, EKP Black, that is. They'd already secured that number 1 seed. We had Titans sitting in second, Giants sitting in third, and Samurai sitting in fourth. And the Aberdeen Snowcats were up basically on the Sunday, weren't they? And it was simple for them. Win 2, which would have been hard. Simple maths, not simple to achieve, but win 2 and be in, because they would have had the head-to-head over Leeds Samurai, because Samurai only came away 2-2 on the day. However, it really didn't go to plan for the Snowcats, did it? And script was normal in terms of EKP Black dominating both teams, but Aberdeen will be very surprised by that middle fixture, which I'm sure you guys are going to point out. But I'll open it up to you guys what you want to talk about from the Aberdeen fixtures.
I think for me, the crazy thing is it's very rare in a flag game that you see a score that low that's like 2-0. That means no touchdowns were scored. There was just a safety, right? And I don't know if I have ever seen that in a flag game before. And I don't know whether it was offenses not firing, if defenses were playing really well. I assumed that, I don't know if these fixtures are in order, if Aberdeen had already played a game against Black and maybe picked up some injuries. But yeah, it's just, for me, when I saw that, I was like, whoa. Like, at 1, they lost, but 2, that score is mental. And I'd be interested to know if there's ever been, I'm sure there probably has been in the history, but it doesn't happen very often, right?
There was definitely a storm that day, wasn't there? But it's not reflected in the other scores, is it? Black were able to move it, weren't they? But to your point, the EKP Black score against Snowcats came up first, so then we knew immediately they wouldn't have a chance. I don't remember whether it was the Snowcats game last or the EKP Black Red game last, but still, to your point, that final game they would have known that they wouldn't have had a chance. But still, to come away 2-0, that sounds like a disgusting game.
Unless maybe Aberdeen decided to mix things up, let people have a bit of fun, play out of position. You don't know when you go into those. Sometimes in those clubs, when you go into those fixtures, you do things like that on the game that doesn't matter, but is irrelevant ultimately. I don't know, but yeah, it is crazy. I wasn't what any of us were expecting to see,
but nonetheless gives EKP Red their first win of the season as well.
Yeah, I think that's obviously the positive here, isn't it? Is that all teams won a game, or all new teams specifically won a game this season, which is good to see. Hopefully, that will give the red team some confidence into next season that they can do it. But I would still like to understand a bit more around the circumstances behind that 0-2. It's interesting, isn't it? So yeah, maybe
if anyone knows, let us know.
Yeah, and do you remember that NFFL game that happened on the last game of the season? Was it Giants? Was it Giants involved with it, where it just ended up being like a party sort of scene for that last game because there was nothing in it? I can't remember which one it was. I've got a feeling it was Sheffield Giants, but I could be wrong.
I think Newcastle as well. It was the Titans, Leeds, Newcastle.
Yeah, there was something going on, wasn't there?
It was the Plains, wasn't it?
Like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
No, not the play. Oh no, it might have been. You might have been right. Anyway,
yeah, I think it was.
Not relevant to this discussion, nonetheless. So I don't know why I brought it up. But yeah, we had this interesting scenario that didn't play out at the end as well, didn't we? Yeah. The Snowcats not being able to make it, so they miss out on it by 2 wins, basically, isn't it? Anything else to bring up for this game day, Arran or Kiwi?
No, just more of the same for Black, isn't it?
Yeah. Finishing off the season 12-0, 510 points scored, 67 points conceded. That's around about what's that? 5 touchdown difference in net points per game.
And although we're not, I'm sure we'll discuss this when we get onto finals, but that's where it's going to get interesting, right? Because they have largely remained unchallenged in this division, ultimately, in my opinion. So that's where things are going to get interesting. But we shall not jump ahead.
We shall talk about that very shortly indeed. So let's jump towards the Saturday game in the MSC. So in London, don't know where, but I think was it Brunel University, I think, if memory serves. We had the triple threat match, basically, wasn't it? Which was winner takes all. If there was some ties or some one-on-ones, then it would get interesting. But if I remember correctly, haven't got the clinch scenarios fresh in my head from a couple of weeks ago. But I think Leicester needed 2-0, Amazons needed 2-0, Flame needed 2-0, and then it just didn't happen that way, did it?
No, so Leicester needed to draw. That's all they did.
Right, fine, brilliant. So
they just needed a draw.
What we ended up happening was something probably not many people predicted, right? So we had the Flame come away 2-0 on that day, which sent the Leicester Huntsmen into their final game 0-1 on the day, and looking behind themselves potentially with depending on what the Birmingham Lions were going to do the next day. And so we had London Flame versus Amazons, that was 45-7. We had London Flame versus Huntsmen, that was 27-25. And then the Huntsmen Amazons drew 7-7, and then it got all tasty going into Sunday. So what stands out to you from these fixtures, guys?
I'll let you go first, Kiwi.
Oh, I was just going to say, do we know if these did these fixtures happen in this order, or did the Huntsman Amazons draw happen first?
I think that the draw happened first.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is I mentioned Neil before, who we were talking to from the Huntsman on the Sunday, and we said to him, obviously, some bit of results we weren't expecting there, had a chat with him. And I have the distinct feeling that he was saying, well, I know for sure he said they just needed a draw. They got the draw against the Amazons, and then they didn't push it against the Flame, basically, because they had already qualified at that point, which is, I think the Huntsman Amazons game was quite close, but going into the final kind of set of drives, they knew they just needed the draw, and that's what they went for in that game, rather than risking it and going for another touchdown towards the end of the game. They just settled for the draw, knowing that that was all they needed to do. And then obviously he did tell us that Flame apparently had quite a decent squad size on the day. It was their home tournament. They probably had a bigger squad than they'd carried for most of the season, which obviously, helped them out in that last game. But again, the Huntsmen already knew that they were through. So
I noticed on their socials, London Flame, because it's nice to see them that they were quite active as well, and a number of London Warriors players that you'll probably have come across Kiwi on there. Certainly, one of their standout performers on the was it the semi-final? I think it was. Which within the season. That was it. So when I did my anonymous scouting report, one of their players came up, and she was playing for the London Flame, number 88 for the Warriors. I'm sorry that I don't know your name off the top of my head, but certainly some skill in that team for sure. To your point.
Yeah, and I think that's where we see when we come on to the later games and we have the conversation about Birmingham, where sometimes those skill players from contact do transfer into flag easier than maybe others, and just because you're good at one doesn't mean you're good at the other. But obviously the Flame have managed to come out on the upside of that. Yeah,
absolutely. And with again, I'm not sure how this all played out, but we obviously had the London Flame beating the Huntsmen. And also the London Flame took care of business with the London Amazons and having the head-to-head there, regardless of the conceded game that the Amazons had. So it didn't actually come back to bite them too much, but it could have done if that Flame Amazons game was closer. But nonetheless, that's a moot point now. So let's have a little look at what happened in Coventry / Nuneaton. We've got across two graphics here, so we've got this group here. Let me know if you want to move on to the next, onto the other ones. But effectively, what we had going into Sunday was that the Lions had a chance, didn't they? So if they went, I think it was 3-1. Was it 4-0 in the end? So if they went 4-0, they would have had a chance, right? So memory serves, they won their first two, didn't they? And then it was their game against the Panthers, which I think that meant that they wouldn't qualify for the playoffs. But please correct me if I'm wrong on that. But let's go through these fixtures that we had on the Sunday.
Yeah, so from a Birmingham perspective, they had their three fixtures against Spears, Gold, and Green, and then they play Panthers. Panthers was the last game of the game day, so there was still, something in it for Birmingham at that point. It was obviously the first time that I'd had a chance to see any of these teams this season, because typically we've been away with the Huskies, and it's been a little bit further away, and not that I'm bitter. Going up to Scotland twice is actually 2 days away, not 1 day away. So when you can't go to the other tournaments and watch when they're playing on a different day. So it was good to get down and see him. It was good to watch the Birmingham Lions, Wayne Hill being the coach there. I'm not sure if he's the head coach, but he's obviously diversifying himself into flag, which was good to see. And it was they were good games to watch, being honest. But I think, being completely honest, all eyes were really on Covball Part 2 in terms of that game. And I'm going to be honest, I'll let Vic give her breakdown on this, but I didn't see that result coming. So all in all, it was a good day. It was a blooming wet day, as we've already mentioned. I cannot believe how wet it was. But on that note, I'll stand down and I'll let Vic, Kiwi, give her assessment of what she saw. I was running around, whereas Vic was the invalid on a chair, so I had more of a decent view to watch everything.
Before we do that, I just wanted to mention, obviously, Nottingham Green getting their first win of the season over Iceni as well. and also Nottingham Gold, getting that win over Iceni too, which was nice to see. I think Iceni had quite a small squad size. They were definitely suffering with the end of season blues, as I like to call them, when your squad starts to shrink a little bit. But just before we move on to Coventry Bowl, was nice to see those wins, for those other teams. On to Coventry Bowl. Interestingly, so we all, I think, know where we were at with the Coventry team. So we went into this week with Panthers having won the first Coventry Bowl convincingly. I can't remember the score, but it was convincing. But we knew, so we knew that for the head-to-head, it had to be Cougars had to win, and they had to win by more than 18, right, to get the head-to-head over the Panthers. Everybody seemed to know that at the sideline, and I would like to take Andy, that you can take some of the credit for that, I'm sure, along with our friends at H&C. But everybody was clear that it had to be 18 points. So the game started out quite tight, if I'm honest. It was quite tight for a while. And then Cougars obviously sort of went on a little bit of a scoring rampage. Then going into coming to the end of the second half, so we're at the business end of the game. Now, I'm not going to quote exact scores because that's not how my brain works, but basically where we were at is Coventry were winning, but by less than 18. They had the ball. They needed to score. I actually think they may have picked the ball from the Panthers, if I recall. And what happened was the Panthers' defense let them score. Let them score, because I remember watching on the sideline being like, what happened there? Surely they didn't just miss those tackles. It's a bit crazy. But what it meant was there wasn't much time left on the clock, and somebody on the Panthers team, whether it was the coach or the players, or they'd discussed this beforehand, I'm not sure, going into this final drive, was we're going to let the Cougars score so that we can get the ball back and score again and keep the deficit at less than 18. Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to spend, 4 downs, essentially 8 downs, stopping them and losing that clock time, they made the conscious decision, I believe, to let them score so that they could get the ball back. And they did score, and they got the ball back. And then, unfortunately, I'm 90% sure that they then threw a pick and Coventry scored again, which then means that now Coventry are the clear number one because they've got the head-to-head because they won by more than 18 points. But it was just some interesting kind of gameplay. Yeah.
And I suppose, you can be on both sides of the fence there, can't you? And that'll totally depend on your confidence as a team and a coach, depending on what you're most confident in. Are you confident in keeping 8 points off the board, or are you confident putting 8 points on the board? And I suppose, that's interesting. Obviously, you're not on the sideline. You don't know that for sure, but you can make a call on the fact that tackles weren't made, etc., etc. So, that's a perfectly reasonable assessment of the situation, but didn't go well, did it, in the end? Didn't end up going the way that they needed it to go.
And it's interesting when you think about it, because they were obviously losing. They ended up with a nil scoreline, so they hadn't even scored. And the fact that you say they chose to back their offense rather than their defense was interesting. Also, the other thing to note on that is, whether it played a factor or not, I'm not sure, is that Coventry Cougars had already played a game, and Panthers came into this game fresh. Now, it depends where you sit on the first game, second game, warm-up. Takes time to gel, get going. Coventry had already had a game against, I think, Nottingham. So it got kind of things moving. I don't know how much of a factor that played, because we know previously, that the setup was different. Cougars were coming in a lot more tired than the Panthers were and all of that. But, the fact that they, backed their offense is an interesting call. It ultimately didn't work out in their favour, but it was something that I hadn't seen before, and it was a bit of an odd one when we were watching it. When you watch something and you go, pretty sure they just didn't make those tackles. There was 3 of them and they were right there. Surely someone would have made the tackle. You kind of question what you're seeing.
Well, I mean, that's what you observed, right? So it'll be interesting to see whether we get any comments about that to clarify or not. But it's probably something that wouldn't be acknowledged either way, would it? And I suppose then that for me, my initial reaction to that scoreline is that's a championship side that have done what they needed to do. It's like the annoying Man United sides of years gone past where they needed that 1-0 or that 1-1 draw and they went and done it. And Coventry feel like that. It feels like they've got the number 1 seed because they did exactly what they needed to do. Yeah, okay, they had a slip up the first time they faced the Panthers, but they corrected that and they've done that and they've ended up being on top, finishing on top. They did what they needed to do to get that number 1 seed, and they stay as far away from EKP Black as they can do until they potentially meet in the final if it all plays out that way as one to make it all the way. But nonetheless, that's a cracking result for the Cougars as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you say championship side also, adapting, learning from the first game. There would have been film. They've obviously, to an extent got Panthers' number, also driven by the fact that there were those couple of picks at least in the game. I think they obviously maybe got a bit of a shock the first time out, but as you say, a championship team that came away, adapted, learned from their mistakes and exploited that, what they saw from the Panthers. So interesting things to come.
2 very dangerous sides nonetheless going into the playoffs, both sides, right? Because if they're both able to beat each other, then no doubt they can go on and beat others from the north going into the playoffs. Should we have a little look at those playoffs then, see what it tees up as, and see what we're left with for Ravenscraig? Because it's very exciting, isn't it? And thank you to Stuart for creating this graphic for us. Great as always. Gives us a nice little overview of what's going to happen on the day. So if we haven't already made it clear, we have the North will be represented by EKP Black, the Sheffield Giants, Manchester Titans and Leeds Samurai, and the Midlands and South will be represented by the London Flame, Coventry Panthers, Leicester Huntsmen, and the Coventry Cougars. And so the way it's seeded is 1 from the south plays 4 from the north, and 1 from the north plays 4 from the south, and then the 2s and 3s from respective conferences play each other as well. So it tees up some maybe not so tasty first round, but I'm looking at those 2 fixtures thinking they're tasty for sure. I'll let you guys take us through your expectations for those quarterfinal matchups and how they've set up for the first round.
By expectations, do you mean predictions? Because I'm not very good at this, and whoever I say will do well won't.
I definitely won't be asking for a prediction from Aaron Harrison because they never go well. And to be fair, we haven't said it. Kiwi made predictions at the beginning of the season, and how many did you get right, Kiwi?
7 from 8.
7 out of 8. And then how many did you get, Aaron?
Did I get 6 from 8?
You got 6 out of 8. You know what? They're both firsts in my mind when it comes to university grades. So well done, both of you. But nonetheless, Vic can still stand up on that against you for a little while anyway. But yeah, Aaron, just take us through sort of like some of the matchups that you're looking forward to seeing and how it might play out. Not asking for you for a prediction.
Yeah, I think for me, the one that I'm actually interested in is probably not the obvious one, but is certainly Titans Huntsman. I'm looking forward to that one because I think both teams probably are, from what bear in mind, I haven't seen Huntsman this year. I'm going off results alone here, but I have seen Manchester Titans, and I think that will be a good matchup. I'm going to be honest, I think the others are pretty much
foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I think so. You never know, and there's always the curveball that gets thrown, and I hope there is, because that's what makes it interesting. So please don't think that I'm not backing your club, because I'm here for it. If there's any curveballs, or if I'm proven wrong, I actually enjoy that because that means that it's not what I expected, and therefore makes it more interesting for me if that doesn't happen. So the only one that I can't say for sure will go a particular way is the Titans Huntsman, and therefore that's why that's my interesting game.
And I think that's the one we were all like, we don't actually know which way that one might go, and it's hard for us to comment. As Arran said, we've not seen the Huntsmen play. We played some preseason against them, but that's a long time ago now. Things change a lot. We played Titans at the weekend. We're a well-drilled team. They're an experienced playoff team, but I believe the Huntsmen were also in the playoffs last year. So it's really hard to know which way that one's going to go. I don't see EKP Black losing. I don't see Coventry Cougars losing. If I'm honest, I think the Coventry Panthers will beat the Sheffield Giants. But again, Sheffield, I don't think are ones that you can rule out. We know that they have the ability and the players to play really well. I don't think you can hold against them what happened against the Huskies last weekend. They also didn't have some of their players playing in that match that they would normally have playing. Marta was on the sideline. So you don't know. Again, my gut feeling is the Panthers will win it. But again, if somebody's going to throw a spanner, it's those middle two games where you get those 2-3 matchups. But Sheffield are going to have to show up as a solid, consistent team, because despite their result against the Cougars last week, the Panthers are a formidable team, and we also know they have the ability to play well and win. So, that's where the interest is. But I agree, the Titans Huntsman games, we were all going to be looking at that first round.
Mm-hmm.
Which sets up a lovely semi-final, if you ask me. The way it thinks it goes, or we think that it'll go, sets up a cracking semi-final. In that, on the assumption that it goes that way, EKP Black versus Panthers.
And that was the jeopardy of Coventry Bowl Part 2, right? That was the whole thing that we were saying, is you want one seed to avoid Black until the final if you can. But in saying that, and I'm going to put this out there, and I don't know, as we mentioned before, I don't think that EKP Black have been largely challenged this year, and we probably haven't seen them play against the level of opposition that we see from the Cougars and the Panthers generally. That'll be the game where we finally get to see the top south, because let's be honest, Cougars, Panthers, across the course of the season, they're pretty evenly matched, although Cougars have got the swing of it at the end of the season. That's where we're all going to be looking to go. Is EKP really as amazing and dominant as we think they are based on their results, or are they going to be pushed and challenged by the Panthers?
That's what I can almost send myself down a rabbit hole with that game one, because you just don't know, do you, when you've got EKP have just gone on an absolute steamroll of that division, and then they come up against a different opposition, and a seasoned team in the London Flame as well, with a lot of GB caliber players, including some current GB players. So do EKP Black, of course, but nonetheless, the Black have scored 6 points less than the Cougars, who have scored the most points in the league. Right, Cougars have scored 516 points. EKP Black have scored 510, but played 4 games less, which is just like, that offense is an offense, isn't it? That's surely that's all you can say, is that EKP Black's offense, if you can stop it, great. Then you're going to do yourself a lot of favors, aren't you? But a team that can score 510 points in 12 games is going to be a force to be reckoned with, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I know it's a different format to what format it is this year in the finals, but there's an element for me here. I can see it panning out almost like history repeating itself, and like last year, where I think I'm going to make my prediction here, Andy. I'm sorry, I'm going to make a prediction here.
But
They'll be cursing you.
Involved in any of the clubs, turn off now.
They'll be cursing. It's cursing.
I think we'll see a repeat of the final last year, basically, because there's echoes of the Panthers. You know, they did quite well against the Cougars last year, and then just not quite there. There was a question mark, and certainly in and around the day of the finals, would the Cougars actually come together and make it? And yeah, they did. They turned it on when it mattered most. And got to the final and then ultimately won it against EKP. So I can see it going that way again. I just don't know what the outcome of that final would be.
So I think I agree in that Cougars almost have the line to the final, right? They've got the easier side of the division. Yes, there's opposition there, but we know that they've beaten the Huntsmen. So if the Huntsmen come out on top there, then they've got those 2 wins over them already in the season. Manchester as a dark horse, again, not someone you can rule out based on their tournament experience. But again, I don't see them probably overturning the Cougars at this point. But, you know, the Panthers did play the semi-final against the Cougars last year. And as Arran alluded to, it was a very, very closely fought match. And I don't remember the score, but I'm pretty sure that Coventry only beat them by a score to go into that final game against CKP. Now, ultimately, they turned it on in the final and won. But these two teams have been so evenly matched that, you know, I don't see it as beyond the realms of possibility that the Panthers could beat EKP and see it as a all Coventry final. But I'm not making any predictions on that because, you know, I can't say. The only one I will say is I think the Cougars will be in the final against either Black or Panthers, but I'm not going to call which.
Interesting. No, it's very interesting, and we talked about this just before we started recording as well. Is that there's 3 clear tiers in the finals, isn't there? Certainly if you were to look at it through net points per game, which is a metric that the league uses, and it's quite a nice one. It's not perfect, but it's quite a nice one to kind of show you dominance within games in relation to points, isn't it? So it's the point difference, and then you divide it by the number of games that you've played. So there's a tier 1, which is EKP, Black, Cougars and Panthers, no shocks there, and then there's a tier 2, which doesn't include the Leeds Samurai. So I think it's to both your points, there's still good teams, right? There's still great players, still GB players dotted around all the teams, and I think, you know, you've already alluded to some players within teams not travelling up to Ravenscraig for that. It's a long journey for 7 of these 8 teams. You know, to be able to get that commitment, which obviously lots of people are committed to this game, but you know, that is a big commitment to anybody. But I can't wait. But you know, as I mentioned already, we're going, aren't we? Well, the 3 of us will be there, and you know, really looking forward to seeing that. And obviously, you can check our friends over WayWH and see it for the streaming and everything as well. But no, 2 weeks on Saturday, isn't it? So we're look forward to getting into this and seeing all the jeopardy and the chaos that could happen. You know, imagine if we had London Flame in the semi-finals. Imagine if we had Leeds Samurai in the semi-finals. We can only dream for chaos, can't we?
And to be fair, with the plate tournament running in parallel with the finals, I think we are going to see some interesting games coming from the plate side of things as well. You know, seeing those losing teams that we know are still good, and some of those like middle of the draw, you know, that bunch of teams that we've just alluded to that we think are all quite close. Seeing how that shakes out in the plate is also going to be, you know, something that I'm really interested in seeing, because we haven't seen these teams play each other. So, you know, it is still, even though they aren't going to make the final semis or the finals, there is that with the plate coming through, we are still going to get a lot of good games to watch.
It's why we love this sort of setup of playoffs where we ensure that we get that cross conference, to borrow a term, because you get to shuffle the pack, don't you? So you're able to then shuffle that north and south pack together, and we'll see how it all shakes out in the end. And and like as you just said, the losers of the quarterfinals go off into a plate tournament, don't they? And they don't travel all that way for one game. They've got the opportunity to play 3. Everyone does, don't they? So really looking forward to it. So we'll be back, won't we, to talk about those results when they come up. Before then, we'll have NFFL Game 1, which is just incredible to think. That is the 15th and 16th of March, if my memory serves me correctly, that's the right dates for the Saturday and Sunday. We get Division 1 action across 3 conferences, I think. There's a cross-conference and then a non-cross conference that weekend. So we'll be back
next
to...
weekend?
Yeah, well,
wow.
a week in a week's time, yeah. So we'll be back next week, I'm sure, to preview that.
To do my swatting up. I've been
absolutely.
so WFFL focused that I'm gonna have to do some 100%. NFFL swatting in the next week.
Just like that, it's around the corner and it'll happen before the finals. And bunch of new teams. Really exciting to see a bunch of new teams. There are some teams who had 1 team last year have now got 2, and 2 teams with 3. So we've got no chance of predicting. Predictions will be useless, but it'll be good to be able to talk through it anyway, to have a look to see what we've got. And we might not be able to talk about the individual fixtures, but we'll be able to bring you a preview to the games and the teams that are in there. So we look forward to doing that for sure. But otherwise, we will be back next week to preview that, and then we'll be back the week after to talk about those results and preview finals. So really looking forward to doing that with you two. But thank you very much for your time, Arran and Kiwi. Rest up, Kiwi. Hope the results are good for you, and hope the recovery happens sooner rather than later. Because you've got some summer touchdowns to score and 1-point conversions to score, haven't you?
Well, and also I think, Andy, it's personally because you don't want to have to do the coffee runs at Ravenscraig because I can't walk. So I'm sure there's 100%. Some element of
100%. I enjoy
it's cold
finals,
in there.
Being able to ask you to do that.
You need the coffee. It's cold in there. So, if I'm still limping, I'll be able to play the injury card and not have to do the coffee run.
Totally, absolutely, no doubt that will be something that I'll be able to help with. But also, little bit of a surprise coming tomorrow when we record for the Bucks playoff, the Bucks preview and review as well. We've got a special guest joining us. I'll give you a hint. It's International Women's Day on Sunday, and there is a semi-final involving a female head coach. So
yay.
Work it out yourself, and looking forward to catching up with that special guest tomorrow as we preview the semi-finals for Bucks. So if you have stayed listening to the 45th minute, then you'll have that nice little cliffhanger coming towards for the next episode. But nonetheless, thank you, Arran and Kiwi, for your time, and we'll catch up again soon. And thank you very much for listening or watching, and we'll catch you again next week. Thank you very much.